She stumbled barefoot across the rain-slick asphalt, mascara bleeding into the corners of her mouth as she screamed for someone, anyone, to stop. Her once elegant dress hung like a torn curtain, soaked and clinging to her trembling frame. Headlights passed. Doors stayed locked. No one wanted the mess. From the shadows, a woman emerged. Frayed coat, worn shoes, a plastic grocery bag in one hand. She didn't hesitate. "Are you hurt?" the woman asked, her voice a lifeline in the storm. The girl recoiled, eyes bloodshot, voice slurred. "Don't touch me." But the woman didn't flinch. She knelt beside her, sheltering her with her own coat, as the wind howled like grief. "I'm not here to hurt you," she whispered. The girl collapsed against her, sobbing. Sirens in the distance. Neon lights pulsing like a heartbeat. That night didn't begin with mercy. It began with a test. A drunk heiress begging in the street. Oh. A widowed mother with no home, no plan, just kindness. They sat in silence beneath the flickering light of a half-broken bus shelter. The woman offered no questions, only her own dry scarf, which she carefully wrapped around the girl's shivering frame. "Why are you helping me?" the girl muttered, her voice hollow, lost somewhere between arrogance and anguish. The woman didn't answer right away. She studied the girl's face, her trembling hands, the bruised pride masked behind smeared luxury. Then softly she said, "Because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it either." The girl's gaze faltered. A silence deeper than noise passed between them. For a moment the night paused, no cars, no sirens, just breath. There was power in that stillness. In a city that never looked twice, here sat two strangers, one from opulence destroyed by her own choices, the other from hardship who still chose compassion. The girl finally spoke with more clarity. "I had everything. The house, the money, the parties. Now I can't even call anyone to pick me up." Her laugh was dry and bitter. "They're probably laughing at me?" The woman listened, nodding but saying nothing. "You don't get it," the girl added, voice cracking. "I'm not like you." The woman turned to her. "You're right," she said calmly. "I never had a mansion, never had money to waste, but I know what it's like to be left with nothing but shame." The girl stared at her, words stolen by the weight of truth. "The difference is," the woman added gently, "you have a chance to choose what kind of person you'll be after this." Something shifted in the girl's eyes. Not acceptance, not forgiveness, but recognition. A sliver of humanity flickering back to life. A gust of wind cut through them, and the woman instinctively drew her thin sweater tighter. The girl noticed. Without a word, she pulled the scarf from her shoulders and returned it to the woman's neck. Their eyes met, silent, awkward, but meaningful. "I never asked your name," the girl murmured. "Laila," the woman said with a faint smile. "And yours?" The girl hesitated. "Avery." Laila nodded, repeating it like a vow. Avery. It wasn't much. But for two people from opposite worlds, that exchange was the start of something deeper. Names turned strangers into stories. And in that moment, Avery was no longer the drunk mess people passed by. She was someone seen. Someone remembered. Avery glanced up at the sky, now slowly clearing, stars faintly visible beyond drifting clouds. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad," she whispered. "Nobody ever does," Laila replied. They sat like that, watching dawn begin to smear the horizon with pale gold. Laila reached into her plastic bag and pulled out a wrapped sandwich. "It's not much, but it's warm," she said, handing it over. Avery looked at it like it was a relic. "You're giving this to me?" "Yes," Laila answered. "Because you need it more than I do." Avery took it with shaking hands. No one had ever seen her as needing anything. Just wanting. That sandwich wasn't a meal. It was mercy. By morning the storm had passed, leaving only puddles and quiet streets. Laila guided Avery to a nearby community kitchen. Modest, crowded, but filled with warmth. The line was long, mostly silent. Avery stood out in her torn designer dress and bare feet, drawing side glances from volunteers and regulars alike. But Laila stood beside her with unshaken calm. Inside, the aroma of lentils and baked bread wrapped around them like a blanket. "I've never stood in a line like this," Avery muttered. "Good," Laila said gently. "That means you haven't needed to. Until now." Avery scanned the room, watching people eat gratefully, eyes lowered. "They're not judging me." Laila smiled. "Not today. Today you're just hungry. Like everyone else." For the first time in hours, Avery exhaled without trembling. They sat across from each other at a scuffed table. Avery clumsily spooned soup into her mouth, her hands still shaking from the night before. "You live like this every day?" she asked, glancing around the room. Laila nodded. "After my husband died, there was no safety net. Just this place, these people." Avery looked down at her tray, shame settling in her gut. "I thought people who ended up here were lazy, or weak." Laila tilted her head. "And now?" Avery didn't answer right away. She swallowed hard, then whispered, "Now I think I was ignorant." Laila reached across the table, touching her hand briefly. "Ignorance is curable, if you let it be." Later, they walked through the narrow alleyways behind the shelter. Laila moved with practiced steps, greeting faces with nods and soft smiles. Avery followed, her heels gone, walking gingerly on blistered feet. "Why do you do it?" she asked. "Help people?" Laila stopped. "Because pain made me soft, not bitter." Avery considered that. "I don't know what it made me. I just know I don't want to go back to the person I was." Laila looked at her. "Then don't." They passed a mural, bright colors, bold letters. "We are each other's keepers." Avery stared at it. "Did you paint that?" "No," Laila said. "But I believe it." They stopped at a corner vendor, selling used clothes. Laila picked through the rack carefully, choosing a worn but clean coat and some walking shoes. She handed them to Avery without a word. "I can't take these," Avery said, resisting. "I'm not your responsibility." Laila shrugged. "You're right, you're not. But I'm still giving them to you." Avery clutched the clothes, unsure whether to cry or run. "You know, back home, everyone pretended to care. But only if there was a camera or consequence." Laila smiled softly. "Well, there's no audience here. Just you and me." That hit deeper than Avery expected. She lowered her head and whispered, "Thank you." As the day warmed, they returned to Laila's temporary shelter, a makeshift room in the back of an old church. A cot, a kettle, a cracked mirror. Nothing more. Avery stood in silence, taking it all in. "You live here?" she asked. Laila nodded. "For now, it's not forever." Avery slowly sat on the cot, folding the coat on her lap. "It's quiet." Laila lit a small candle on the windowsill. "Peace can still exist in broken places." Avery watched the flame flicker. "I never thought I'd feel safe in a place like this." Laila poured tea into mismatched mugs. "Safety isn't about where you are. It's who you're with." Avery woke with a start. The candle had long since burned out, but the scent lingered, lavender and wax. Laila was already up, gently sweeping the floor with a worn broom. "You don't sleep much?" Avery asked, rubbing her eyes. "I sleep enough," Laila replied with a small smile. "Mornings are quieter. They belong to me." Avery sat up, stretching stiff limbs. "It's weird. I didn't dream. Not once." Laila looked at her, then said, "Maybe you needed a rest from yourself." Avery chuckled lightly, then turned serious. "Can I stay another night?" Laila didn't hesitate. "You can stay as long as you need to, Avery, but only if you help wash the mugs today." Avery nodded, surprised by the tears pressing at her eyes. No one had asked her to be useful in years. They spent the morning scrubbing kitchen trays with volunteers, shoulder to shoulder among chatter and clatter. Avery fumbled at first, dropping a soapy bowl that shattered. Heads turned. Her face flushed. "Just keep washing," Laila said softly, handing her another dish. "No blame, no fuss." Just trust. Over time, Avery's movements steadied. She laughed at a joke from a man with only one tooth, and even offered a towel to a child drying forks. For a moment she wasn't the heiress. She was just another pair of hands doing what needed to be done. Laila watched from across the sink, her face unreadable but her eyes proud. Avery met her gaze briefly and smiled. Something in her posture had changed, less brittle, more anchored. During a break, they sat outside beneath the church's crumbling archway. The sun had warmed the pavement. Avery lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. Laila said nothing, just watched the smoke curl skyward. "I used to think money made me powerful," Avery said. "But it didn't protect me from betrayal. From myself." Laila leaned back against the brick. "Power without purpose eats itself." Avery flicked ash to the side, eyes distant. "Do you ever miss your old life?" "Every day," Laila answered. "But I don't mourn it anymore." Avery paused. "I'm not sure who I am without mine." Laila's voice softened. "Then maybe it's time to meet that person." Avery turned to her, cigarette paused mid-air, breath caught in her chest. They returned inside to find a crowd forming. A young woman, with a bruised face, had just arrived, clutching a baby in a threadbare blanket. Panic clouded her eyes. Avery froze, heart racing. She saw her reflection in that girl, not in circumstance but in despair. Without waiting she stepped forward, offering her coat, then asked, "Do you need help?" The girl hesitated, unsure, but Avery didn't pull back. She simply waited. Laila watched from the hall, arms crossed, a slow nod forming. Later, after the girl had eaten, Avery sat beside her on the floor, talking softly. Not from pity, but from memory. Laila whispered under her breath, "She's becoming." That night, Avery sat alone near the window, looking out at the flickering city lights. Her reflection shimmered on the glass, smudged, unfamiliar, real. Laila approached with 2 mugs of tea. "Hard day?" she asked. Avery nodded slowly. "But it felt right. Not easy. Just right." Laila handed her the tea and sat beside her. "That's what healing feels like. It isn't comfort, it's honesty." Avery sipped, then smiled faintly. "I think I was always waiting for someone to rescue me." "And now?" Laila asked. Avery looked out again. "Now I think I want to rescue myself." Laila placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Neither spoke again. They didn't need to. The next morning brought whispers. A city blog had picked up a photo, Avery, in her borrowed coat, serving soup at the shelter. Headline speculated, "Heiress in hiding?" She stared at the screen in Laila's borrowed phone, heart pounding. "They found me," she said. Laila looked up from her sewing, unbothered. "And what do they see?" Avery laughed bitterly. "A drunk rich girl who disappeared." Laila raised a brow. "Not who you are. Just who they remember." Avery placed the phone down. "I'm not ready to face them." Laila set aside her needle. "Then don't face them for them. Face them for you. That girl in the picture, she looks like she's fighting to be someone better." Avery swallowed hard. "What if I fail? Then you try again. That's how we survive." By midday, cameras circled the shelter. Reporters whispered to volunteers, hoping for sound bites. Avery stayed hidden behind the pantry shelves, her breathing shallow. Laila entered quietly and knelt beside her. "You can stay here," she said, "or you can speak your truth." Avery clenched her jaw. "They don't want the truth. They want a scandal." Laila nodded. "Then give them something they can't sell, a real story." Minutes later, Avery stepped into the entryway. Cameras clicked. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She simply said, "I'm not here because I lost everything. I'm here because I finally saw what I never had." Gasps, dead up. Silence. And then, one person clapped. Then another. That night, Avery's story was everywhere. Some mocked her. Others were moved. Donations poured into the shelter. But Avery didn't celebrate. She scrubbed counters and served food, ignoring her buzzing phone. They still think this is a redemption arc, she told Laila. Maybe it is, Laila said, wiping her hands. But it's not for them to write. Avery paused. Do you think I'm changing? Laila turned to her. No, Avery, you're uncovering. The girl who knelt in the rain was always inside you. Avery's eyes welled up. I'm scared I'll go back. Laila held her gaze. Then let fear remind you how far you've come, not how far you could fall. The shelter's director called Avery and Laila in. A donor wants to fund housing for 5 women, he said. All because of your story. Avery blinked. What do you mean, my story? He handed her a printout of an email. You didn't ask for sympathy, you just showed up. People noticed. Avery's hands trembled. Can I help choose who gets it? That's the idea, he said. Laila smiled. Looks like you've got work to do. Later that night, Avery sorted files and read names. Real women. Real lives. This feels heavier than money ever did, she whispered. Laila, sitting nearby, replied, That's because it's real power, the kind that costs you. Later, they stood outside beneath the stars. Avery wore a donated coat and worn boots, but her eyes shone differently now, clearer. I never thought I'd be grateful for breaking down, she said. Pain is a doorway, Laila replied. Some of us just take longer to walk through it. Avery looked up at the sky. Do you think I'll make it? Really make it? Laila placed a hand on her shoulder. You already are. They stood in silence, wrapped in night and memory. No headlines. No past. Just 2 women who found each other in a storm and stayed when the rain stopped. Avery exhaled. I think I finally believe you. Avery stared at the letter in her hands. It was from her father's lawyer. A summons. Her family had discovered her whereabouts. She sat on the cot in silence, heart thudding. They want a meeting, she said to Laila, who was folding sheets. They say I embarrassed them. That I abandoned my responsibilities. Laila didn't look up. Do they know the woman you've become? Avery shook her head. They only see the scandal, not the survival. Laila sat beside her. Then go, not for them, for you, to tell your story, your way. Avery exhaled shakily. What if they tear me down again? Laila's voice was firm. Then you rise anyway, but this time you won't be rising alone. She entered the grand office lobby like a stranger in her own life. Marble floors. Glass chandeliers. Staff who used to jump now barely glanced. Her brother greeted her with a cold nod. You look different, he said. You mean real, she replied. In the conference room their father sat at the head of the table, expression unreadable. We want you to return, he said, under conditions. Avery's jaw clenched. I'm not a contract, I'm your daughter. And your image impacts our legacy, he countered. She stood slowly. Then maybe your legacy needs to change. She turned without waiting for a response. That was her answer. And for the first time she didn't need theirs. Back at the shelter, Avery found Laila sweeping leaves at the back gate. I walked away, she said. Laila smiled faintly. I knew you would. They wanted me back on their terms, as if nothing changed. Laila nodded, sweeping gently. But you've changed. And now you decide what you become. Avery leaned against the wall, staring into the dusk. I don't want the old world. I want to build something different. Laila looked at her. Then let's start here. Avery blinked. Here? Yes, you want change? Begin with what's in front of you. Avery stared out at the lot behind the church, weeds sprouting from the cracks. Let's do something with this. Weeks passed, and the lot transformed. Avery fundraised with the same fire she once used for Gallus. Volunteers arrived daily. Together, they cleared debris, planted flowers, and built benches. Children laughed where silence once lingered. One day, as Avery handed out snacks, a former classmate arrived. You could have been running a firm, she said. Instead, you're here. Avery smiled. "It's exactly where I need to be." The classmate laughed, uncomfortable. "You're serious?" "Completely." That night, Laila watched from the window as Avery laughed under string lights, her arms covered in dirt. She looked nothing like the heiress in heels, and everything like a woman who'd reclaimed her soul. Avery sat on a bench they'd built together, the garden alive with chatter. She looked up at Laila. "What if someone like me hadn't ended up here?" Laila smiled gently. "Then someone else would have stepped in. That's the truth of kindness. It's never wasted, only transferred." Avery turned to her. "You saved me." Laila shook her head. "I reminded you. You saved yourself." The breeze carried the scent of jasmine. The laughter of children rippled through the garden. Avery's heart swelled, not with pride, but with peace. For the first time, she didn't feel like a visitor in her own life. She felt like home. Laila's cough had grown worse. She brushed it off with a wave and a forced smile, but Avery noticed. "You're burning up," Avery whispered, placing a hand on her forehead. Laila turned away. "It's just a cold." But Avery wasn't convinced. She accompanied Laila to the clinic. The fluorescent lights hummed as they waited. "You should have told me," Avery said. Laila looked tired but calm. "You've been busy saving others. Didn't want to interrupt." Avery gripped her hand. "You're not an interruption. You're the reason I even know what saving looks like." The doctor called her name. As Laila disappeared behind the curtain, Avery sat alone, her fingers trembling. She wasn't ready to lose her. The diagnosis came like thunder in clear skies. Laila had late-stage pneumonia, worsened by months of untreated exhaustion. "She needs rest, real rest," the doctor said. Avery nodded, her jaw clenched to keep from crying. Back at the shelter, Avery insisted Laila sleep while she handled everything. Meals, cleanup, paperwork. She worked with a quiet desperation, trying to carry it all. But the fear was constant. Laila, once indestructible in her eyes, was now fragile. One evening, Avery sat beside her and whispered, "You were the one who carried me. I don't know if I can carry this without you." Laila opened her eyes weakly and smiled. "You already are." Word spread quickly. Laila was sick. The garden community responded in full force. People brought meals, sang songs under her window, lit candles. Avery watched in awe as the kindness Laila once gave returned in waves. She stepped outside one evening and found the mural wall freshly painted with her words. "Pain made me soft, not bitter." It stopped her cold. She touched the paint, still fresh. Her breath caught in her throat. For so long, she'd clung to Laila as a guide. Now she realized the guide had made room for others. And they were answering. Avery smiled through tears. The seeds had grown, and Laila's love had become a forest. Laila sat up slowly one morning, her strength beginning to return. Avery helped her to the garden, wrapping her in a blanket. They sat on the same bench, side by side. "I thought I'd lose you," Avery said softly. Laila looked at the garden blooming around them. "You won't, not in the ways that matter." Children waved. Volunteers offered tea. Life moved gently, anchored in the soil they'd sown together. "I always feared dying invisible," Laila said. "But look what you've built." Avery took her hand. "No, what we built." They sat in silence as petals danced in the breeze. Laila's eyes closed briefly, peace softening her features. That night, Avery stood at the pulpit of the old church during a shelter fundraiser. The space was filled beyond capacity. Cameras were gone. Only people remained, those who mattered. "This isn't a story about rescue," she began, voice steady. "It's a story about remembering who we are, even when the world forgets us." She spoke of Laila, of rain and refuge, of mercy without judgment. Tears shimmered in the eyes of the crowd. Laila sat in the front row, wrapped in a shawl, eyes full of pride. Avery ended simply, "I thought I had everything once, but I was empty." Then a stranger helped me. And now I live full. Months later, the garden had blossomed into a sanctuary. Children painted rocks. Mothers shared stories over tea. Avery sat on the steps, helping a girl thread beads onto a bracelet. A journalist approached quietly, camera lowered. "You're Avery Rhodes, right?" Avery nodded without looking up. "Used to be," she said. "Who are you now?" the woman asked. Avery smiled, tying off the bracelet. "Someone who finally shows up for others, and for herself." The journalist scribbled something down. "What changed you?" Avery met her eyes. Kindness, real, relentless kindness. Behind her, Laila walked slowly with a cane, nodding at the reporter. Avery stood, not in fear, but in calm readiness. This was her story now. The article published a week later. No scandals. No dramatics. Just truth. From Heiress to Harbor. The title read. The community responded. Donations surged. More hands arrived to help. Avery, however, stayed grounded. She started a job training program for displaced women, working out of the old church basement. One morning, she looked up to see a familiar face. Her brother. "Dad sent me," he said. "Wants to donate." Quietly. Avery studied him. "Why?" "Because he saw the photos. Saw you." She nodded slowly. "We'll take the help, but not the credit." Her brother gave a half smile. "You've changed." "No," she replied. "I just stopped pretending." That evening, Laila handed Avery a small wrapped box. "You've earned this," she said. Inside was a necklace, simple silver, with one word etched into the charm: Grace. Avery traced the letters with her thumb. "Why this word?" she asked. Laila smiled. "Because you've given it. And now you wear it." Avery clasped it around her neck, blinking back tears. "You gave me more than grace, Laila. You gave me a map." "No," Laila corrected gently. "I just held the lantern. You walked the path." They embraced, tighter than before. And in that moment the pain they'd weathered turned into something else. Something sacred. Something lasting. They returned to the bench in the garden, one final time as the seasons shifted. Leaves turned to gold around them. "I used to fear being forgotten," Avery said. "Now, I hope others are remembered instead." Laila nodded, breathing deeply. "You've made something no scandal can erase." Avery rested her head on Laila's shoulder. "If you ever leave, I'll keep building." Laila smiled. "That's how I'll know I did my job." In the breeze, laughter echoed from every corner of the garden. It wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd passed through. The place Avery once stumbled into broken was now a haven, and she had helped make it bloom. As the sky dimmed to twilight, Avery stood alone by the gate, watching the last light fall across the flowers. She whispered, "I came here broken." Her hand brushed the gatepost, now engraved with words she'd chosen. "We begin again, not when we're perfect, but when we're honest." She turned back toward the shelter, eyes clear, steps steady. This wasn't the end of her story, it was the end of her silence. She would speak. She would build. And she would stay. Not because she had to, but because she belonged. And as the first stars blinked awake, her heart whispered one final truth. She was no longer lost. She was home.